Welcome to the I Create Daily podcast. I'm Leora Alderson.
And I'm Devani Alderson. We are your co-hosts on this journey of creativity and productivity.
I Create Daily is for artists in every genre of creating, from musicians to writers, crafters to inventors, bloggers to entrepreneurs. I Create Daily is a movement for creators serious about your art.
If you're into creating anything, this podcast is definitely for you. Thank you so much for joining us on this journey. Hello and welcome to another episode on the I Create Daily podcast, a movement for creators serious about their work. I'm Devani.
And I'm Leora. And our guest today is an award-winning book writing coach, publishing coach, author, and international speaker on writing and publishing. Lisa Tenner assists writers in all aspects of the writing process and has coached clients to 5- and 6-figure book deals with over a dozen publishers, including HarperCollins, Simon & Schuster, Random House, Hay House, as well as self-publishing. In addition to writing, mentoring, and teaching her own courses, such as her 5-step system for inspiration and success for writers, Lisa also teaches writing courses at Harvard Medical School. And from the words of one of Lisa's dozens of happy clients, Lisa Tenner was the most important person I would hire on my journey to becoming an author. Welcome, Lisa Tenner.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here.
Yeah, great to see you and learn from you about how you began this journey of being a writing coach and getting into writing as your profession as well.
It was kind of very all over the place. I would say as a child, I always dreamed of being a writer, but my path to that was very circuitous. I took a lot of writing courses in college and I minored in writing. But I decided I didn't want to pay the extra tuition to have a second major, so I did not major in writing. But I had some incredible teachers as an undergrad, including Frank Conroy, who at the time was the director of the National Endowment for Arts and Literature. And the following year, he became the director of the Iowa Writers Workshop and is kind of known for being one of the best writing teachers maybe of the last century. He's deceased now, but his voice is still in my head when I edit and both my clients' work and my own. So that, I had some really strong beginnings in terms of the people who taught me to write. But then I, took a job where my father was big on, take a good job where you're going to get paid regularly and all of that. So I worked for Pacific Gas and Electric, and then I worked for a nonprofit, running a nonprofit as executive director for 10 years. But in that time, I got inspiration to write a book, which I co-authored with 2 other people. We did eventually, after 7 years, after my first initial idea about it, it got published by Health Communications, so a traditional publishing company. And I soon realized that I actually wasn't interested in teaching workshops about the subject, which was creatively working with your anger, because you get all these angry people in these workshops, and I realized I really wanted to work with people's creativity. So my initial thought was, well, let me teach people the steps I took to write in the zone. But interestingly, what happened was that people wanted to know, well, how do I get published? And so I quickly became known for helping people with book proposals and helping them on that publishing journey. And then was very fortunate to become part of the faculty of Harvard Medical School's publishing course, because that's where I've met many, many of my clients. And so a lot of interesting books on health and self-help and the kinds of subjects that people in the medical profession are writing.
Yeah, definitely. So it was good teachers that inspired the teacher in you, it sounds like, as well.
Definitely. Although, I'll say it was interesting with Frank because he was an incredible teacher when it came to the editing and really strong writing and tightening. He was really great with tightening, but he was not a coach. And he was kind of the opposite, and I think didn't think very much of these MIT undergrads that were in his class. So, it wasn't really, I think I had to recover from his class to really have confidence in myself again. Oh. And so, sometimes you learn what to do from your teachers. And then I also learned, what the missing piece, that it's so important to see the strengths of a writer and bring that out and help them feel confident that that's just as much our job as, the techniques of editing. So, I will say that it was a mixed bag.
Yeah. No, that makes so much sense. What came to mind was the concept of the creative process is an opening of oneself, and which can often be vulnerable. And, to be in a scenario of being instructed by someone who might be extremely direct and even painfully so, can squelch, that creative flow for many. So that's a really good point. Yeah. Relative to encourage, because creativity has to, if you close down from fear, then it inhibits creativity. Mm-hmm. So so the coach's role then really, and mentor, is such a great term, because that implies cheerleading and guiding along and facilitating what's trying to come out.
Exactly. And we want to be honest, and certainly not sugarcoat things. Yes. But, I think in our culture, we tend to focus on what's wrong and try to solve the problem. And that's half the equation. The other half is, how do we, or maybe even more than half, like how do we nurture what's already there and call attention to it?
Yeah. So you do, so tell us the array of all that you're doing now. We were just walking the dogs a little bit before our interview with you so that they would be rested and not just, and Devani was remarking on how it seems like you're doing so many things.
Yeah, you have so many courses and programs and then services that you provide on your site. Just where do you spend a lot of your time, and how do you manage all of that?
Thanks. Yeah, that as a creative person, that's sometimes a challenge. So right now I'm teaching my my big program. It's called Bring Your Book to Life. And the idea is that sometimes people sign up just before the class starts, and some people sign up several months ahead. And so there's a bunch of pre-work they can do. Well, once the class starts, and that, I do have them do, in getting clear of the book concept, the structure of the book, and then working one-on-one with me to really fine-tune that. And then when the class begins, we have 8 or 9 weeks of classes, and the idea is to write a rough first draft in those 8 to 9 weeks. So, then you're really writing quickly and just getting that flow down on paper, and you're going to fine tune it later. But all that pre-work really helps to make that happen in a quick way. So it's a really fun time. They're really interesting books, and there's such a variety. And I teach by teleseminar. So the actual group calls, there's one-on-one with me and feedback on the writing, but the group calls, I can actually give an exercise and put people in pairs on the call so that they're working privately to do the exercise and then come back together in the larger group and share notes and insights and challenges. And so it's like being in a live workshop. Yeah. It's really fun, and it's a rich environment. There are 14 people in the group, so it's not it's not some huge number. Everybody feels heard, and there's a connection that we make as a community. So I think I found that sweet spot between, they really need to be focusing on their own book and not focusing on, reading other people's work and stuff like that very much, or they're not going to get a book done. Right. But we do, I'm so sorry about that. Let me just turn that down. But we do have, should I close that? Or I am so sorry.
No worries.
We do have a.
We can just pause it for a second. Okay, so Lisa was talking about, you were talking about the number of people in your courses, about 14, which is perfect because you need an even number because you pair them at sometimes, I think. And you were talking about the challenge of that you have found the sweet spot rather between the amount of time they focus on their own work versus the amount of distractions by tuning into others' work, I think. Where we left off.
Yeah. So I feel like I found this sweet spot of how much we focus on their work, which is most of the time. They're mostly just writing their book and little else. But they do have an accountability partner, which is 5 quick questions to make sure they're on track. And if they're not, to get back on track quickly. And I find that that's like the perfect amount to have some accountability and support, but they're not coaching each other. They're not reading each other's work or anything like that. And then we do have a bonus time at the end of the call. The call is an hour and 15 minutes. At the end of that, there's a bonus that people can stay on and hear somebody read and give them some feedback, and also share how whatever I taught that day might apply to that writing. So where did you notice that the person did some showing and not telling? Or where did you notice some really great verb choices? So it's really fun. It's very interactive, and I love how the technology enables something so intimate where people might be coming from all over the world, but feel this connection with each other.
Right, definitely. What technology are you using for it? Because you mentioned that you're able to have them pair off during.
Yeah, I use Maestro Conference, which I love. And it also allows me to give people mics individually and take some polls on the call. People can raise their hands if they've got questions. So a lot of great things to make it a smooth call and an interactive community.
Yeah, definitely. Now, sorry.
There you go. I was going to ask what types of authors. It seems like mostly on your site it's nonfiction authors, and especially in the either the medical genre or the personal development genre. But what type of author is good for your course?
Yeah, I have a variety of people in the course. I would say a lot are working on a self-help book or how-to, a few business books. What else right now? Sometimes people work on a memoir. I generally, if a memoir has some self-help in it, I might be a good match. My course might be a good match. But a straight memoir, you're going to need a lot more time to get, even a first draft of a book. So generally, it's not as good a match for that, and certainly not for fiction. I do have a part of, you mentioned a lot of stuff on my website. I do have a referral portion of my business because I do get so many people who are maybe not in my genre. I hear from people with fiction or children's books or ghostwriting, and so I actually have a referral service as well, and many really talented editors and ghostwriters in all kinds of areas. So, and that's fun because I love that aspect of really getting clear on what a person needs and finding that perfect match for them. So it's a fun aspect too, really different from the other work.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it makes sense to even have fun with the referral portion of it, like you were saying, because then you get a chance to like big picture mastermind with that person who's just coming into it, oftentimes brand new, no idea of what's going to serve them best. Excuse me. So how often do you run your course? You said it's about 8 to 9 weeks. And so
that I just do once a year because it really is a big commitment on my part. I'm reading up to 30 pages from each person in the course and have somewhere. This course I did put a cap on, but usually my cap is higher. And I just knew this time, usually it's 20. And I just knew I didn't want that many people in at this time because it is a big commitment. But so I do that once a year. I also do another class, a book proposal class, and that's once a year. That's going to be in the fall. And sometimes I'll teach writing in the zone, which is fun. That's the class that first got me on this road, where it was taking the things that I used for writing in the zone for my first book and applied them to anybody with a creative project, but then I really started to focus on writers and especially people writing books. Sometimes I have a few bloggers in that class too, but it's really fun. And I do an exercise that I developed over time called Meet Your Muse, and it's a guided visualization. Generally, I'm taking people through a meadow and into the woods and into this little cabin where they meet their muse, their inner source of creativity. And it's really fun. We'll come up with a list of questions ahead of time when I'm working one-on-one with someone, and we'll ask those questions. And, often it's sort of an intuitive process. As their muse answers, I might come up with other questions to go deeper or go in a slightly different direction. But it's so cool to see how they answer questions when they're connected to that, as opposed to sort of maybe earlier on the call, they'll be sort of in their head and second guessing themselves. And then when they really connect with that muse, it's like so clear. And sometimes it's really different. I've had people's muse say, you're writing the wrong book. Here's the book to write. Or, here's your reader, not this. So it's a nice way also to clarify things before we really jump in. Because sometimes I might say, well, from a marketability standpoint, here's what would work best. But that might not be what works best from that soul, and heart and passion standpoint. And we'll also, of course, look at like what's their vision and what make a lot of the decisions based on their vision and their goals. But that muse is such a great touch point for making sure we're on track.
And that you bring up a really interesting point about the marketability of a book, and then the like what you really want to write. How do you help guide? And I know it's such a different answer depending on the book and the person, but what are some general tips that you have that you help people determine when they should go let me make this a little bit more marketable versus let me just write what the soul needs to write? And how do you help them bridge that and sort of weave it together?
That's a great question. So we'll start with their vision, because depending on their vision, the marketability might not even be as much an issue. If their vision is, I want a legacy book for my family, we don't have to worry about that. If their vision is, well, I want speaking gigs, then we need to think about, well, who do you want to be speaking in front of and who would hire you? So they may want to be speaking in front of one group, but that's a group where you couldn't really get hired. Like nobody has money to pay you as a speaker. So does that make sense from a business standpoint? Is it sustainable, right? We always want it to be a sustainable project so that it's going to support you and bring in income so that you can do more of what you love and not sort of be thinking, okay, how do I make this work? This is just costing me money. So we look at, what's the vision and what's the goal, and therefore, look at the marketability from that standpoint, from that lens, I would say. So once we have that vision, that does help us a lot. The other piece is, do they want to self-publish or traditionally publish? And if they want to traditionally publish, usually they do need a significant platform, which is, as you know, a significant reach, right? Either they have a podcast as you do, and so they're reaching people that way, or they have a strong Google presence and mailing list, or maybe they do a lot of speaking in person. And often, there's a mixture of a few different things that make for a strong platform. But that's something publishers want to know, that you're already reaching the people that would buy your book, especially with prescriptive fiction like self-help or health books or business books. So, I'm sorry, prescriptive nonfiction, I think I said fiction.
Yeah, got it.
I was going to be a follow-up question, but we cleared that one.
Yeah, so those are like some of the ways we look at it. And then let's say they're thinking traditionally published, but then they say, oh, I don't want to do all those things. Well, then we'll take a step back and say, okay, well, maybe you want to revise your expectations and your goals. Maybe you want to self-publish and let the book actually help you grow your platform in a more organic way than trying to force something and do it quickly. So, often that works well for people, and maybe entering some contests so they can win some awards, and then that way show some additional cachet for the book, outside endorsements, or maybe they just get some really great endorsements, or a forward from a best-selling author or celebrity can also help both with the cachet and credibility, and also just on Amazon, which is a search engine. If somebody searches on that best-selling author and suddenly your book comes up too. So that can be a really great strategy. So, we'll brainstorm about strategies that can work well for their particular book.
Right.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And that's really the advice. Just whether you're writing a book or doing any kind of creative project, it's really like start with your vision and goals and then build your plan out from there, depending on who you want to reach and how many people you want to reach. And then, we talk about that a lot, even with fiction writers, like, okay, you're writing the story, but who are you really trying to reach? What is the goal here? So that's great.
Yeah. And so what comes to mind as you were talking is that your process of finding the muse, of teaching people how to write in the zone, etc., is ripe and ready for its own book. Kind of reminiscent of Julia Cameron's, is it Morning Way?
Morning Pages?
Morning Pages. There's a process, and hers is immensely popular, as is her following. So do you have any goals in mind yourself on doing your own book again?
Yes. And I have pieces of these books. This is like the true cobbler's children. My books are all cobbler's children. Yeah, so I do have a Writing in the Zone book, and then I sort of morphed to a couple other ideas. So like now I'm actually trying to decide, okay, can I fit these all together? I think I have all the pieces, and maybe it's a way of like, how do I want to fit these together? Do I just have Writing in the Zone, or do I have these other pieces I want to bring in? So yeah, I'm kind of playing with that right now. And that's another reason, like when this class is over, I'm going to take a little time for my own books before I go back to doing a lot of coaching and teaching, because it's so easy, when you have people coming to you all the time, to just say yes to everything, and then your own books don't get written. So I have to take my own medicine. And that's sometimes the hardest thing is like, okay, I tell my clients that they have to clear their plate, and they need to schedule the time in their books. One thing that works really well for me is working with a friend. So just we get together at the library together, do some writing. That always works for me. I did that a couple weeks ago with a friend, and just reminded like, oh yeah, this always works for me.
Oh, that's good. And you have a lot of the group. Is most of your coaching group coaching format, or are there does somebody, if you ever, do you work one-on-one with anybody?
I do.
If so, do they need to have gone through one of your group coaching programs, or how does
they don't need to? Generally, like for editing, I would say if they haven't gone through my program, it's less likely that I'll have the bandwidth to take them on, but occasionally a project just feels like a really good fit, and I will say yes to an editing project. And those are often some of the most fun projects, is ones that I took on, even though the person hadn't done my course. But yeah, I do a lot of book proposal work with people one-on-one, and I do some editing one-on-one. And I love to do book concept consultations. So when somebody's at that very beginning trying to figure out like, what's my book? I have like a self-study course, Quick Start to Kickstart Your Book. It's like $97, and it really helps them get that clarity of their vision, their goals, create a vision statement, really get clear on the audience and features and structure. It works best for like self-help and how-to and business books and those kinds of books. Like it does have a little information on memoir, but I would say there are probably other programs that are even stronger for memoir. But that is a great starting place. And then we do a book concept consultation where they have a questionnaire and send it back to me. And I really spend some time with that before our call. So I have some ideas for them, and I know where I want to go with it and ask them questions. And then we often do the Meet Your Muse exercise at the end of that to see what their muse has to say about where we've come to and what we're thinking of in terms of the book. So I love that. I'm a big I just love those starting points of like kind of what could this book be. And I love brainstorming. One client that was really fun to work with was Carrie Barron, who is co-author of The Creativity Cure. And when I met her at the Harvard course, she was pitching the book as I'm creative, but I can't create. And an agent turned to me and said, oh, where would I sell that? And she was kind of thinking like, this doesn't feel like a big book yet. And then when we did the book concept consultation, because I ended up working with Dr. Barron, she was kind of thinking of her audience, right, as people who see themselves as creative and see their problem as I can't create. But when we talked, it was more, well, the clients she works with in her psychiatry practice are depressed, anxious, or unhappy, which is a huge audience and a very desperate one for, they want something to fix their problem. And so then I came up with the title, The Creativity Cure. And we worked together on the book proposal, and it actually got a 6-figure book deal with Scribner. So, it's fun for me to sort of listen to the person and sort of echo back some of what I'm hearing, and also seeing in the possibilities and what might make that book not just especially marketable, but really juicy and fun. And how can we how can we make it even more powerful for the reader? So I love experiential kinds of things, and I love helping authors think about how they can turn a book from, maybe they've got some stories in their life, but if they're not a really amazing writer, it's not very easy to write a successful memoir. But it's pretty easy to learn how to tell a story well, and then add some tools like journaling prompts or other kinds of exercises to bring those lessons into the reader's life. So I love doing stuff like that. That's especially fun.
Yeah. Your role, it seems, and I guess this is common to coaches and mentors in general, though, is that of a visionary and a generalist, because you have to have the whatever they say, 30,000 foot view sort of thing of the industry, as well as the writing and the techniques of writing, what makes a good story, and then what options, what markets, etc. So that's like the big picture view of the whole industry, which of course, I mean, that's what you do as a publishing coach and a writing coach. But it's such an important role because so many people, like many of your clients are, like Devani indicated, coming from the medical professions or some kind of self-help kind of industry or business. And they are experts in their niche, and as such, they don't know about the book publishing industry. They know their story, they know their subject, and that's what they need help understanding, how to get it out there in the hands of the people that want to read it in a way, like such as that title change, in a way that will actually appeal not just to those, but even beyond that initial market.
Yeah, that's definitely true. And it's interesting because I do work with a lot of people in medicine and therapists, and they've learned to write in an academic way often. And so part of my job is teaching them how to write in a way that's conversational and that draws the reader in. And that's really fun for me. I just love seeing writers get so much better at their craft. I used to teach, and I might do this again at some point, but I used to teach Bring Your Book to Life also live in Narragansett, Rhode Island. And one of the people in class once saved everybody's writing in a notebook, and she showed us like the writing from the very beginning and the writing from 8 weeks later.
Wow.
And it was amazing to see the transformation of them as writers, because in that class, which I don't do as much in the online class, but we actually, everybody got a chance to read a few times throughout, and we'd spend like the first, it was a longer class because in person you can spend more time. So we maybe did an hour and a half of teaching, and then we would do another hour and a half or 2 hours of somebody reading, and then the group would give feedback. So then we really got to see that. Although, with editing, I see that too. I'll give people the editing feedback, and then it's amazing sometimes how somebody, I think, I'm not even sure I can help this person. They're so all over the place. And then, 2 drafts later, it's like, wow, where did you come from? Were you born knowing how to write? It just, it's such a difference.
Yeah. Well, what's amazing about this process, and we also interviewed another book coach company a couple weeks ago, but they focus more on fiction writers. And But what's so awesome is that it's bringing writers together in a community format, whether it's one-on-one coaching or group coaching. Regardless, it's them having somebody else on their side wanting their book to be successful, which can be, like you were mentioning, when you're so focused in your specialized field and writing your story, it's so easy to get caught up in, this is my story, this is my field, and sort of like forget that, well, other people are going to be reading this eventually too. So it's good to have a supportive community.
Yeah, absolutely. It's one of the really powerful things that I see in the course is that community. And, sometimes I'll find out like years later, one of my clients just got a book deal, but she originally took the class quite a few years ago, and then she was working on developing her platform more. And so, it took her a while to get to the point where her proposal was ready to send in to the agent. And in all that time, she had stayed in touch with her partner from the 8-week class, and they checked in every week. So it is really neat to see how people continue to support each other, often way beyond the class.
And I'm so glad you mentioned that concept too, because it's so important to recognize that this is a journey that, it could be a longer journey than most of us, we're impatient. We have the idea of a book and we hope that in less than a year, it'll be out in a bestseller. But like you said, and we talked about this often with the I Create Daily audience, and that is, you really do need to, preferably, the easiest way, in other words, to sell more books initially is to already have an audience. Mm-hmm. It may not be the easiest if that's antithetical to your personality, to grow a social platform, but even those people who are introverts, typically they're passionate about their specific topic, their specific genre of interest, and end up finding that they really love associating with people like-minded in that regard. And
with the internet, you don't actually have to physically be near the people, so it might be a little easier step.
And in a Facebook group, so joining a Facebook group or coaching program where you get a chance to recognize that, to have that support and that encouragement to recognize, I'm sort of like, okay, what if it takes 5 years? At the end of 5 years, 5 years is going to come anyway. So do you want to get to the 5 years and having accomplished all these things on your bucket list? Or do you want to get there and look back and say, darn, I should have done it, even though it was going to take longer than I thought?
Yeah, absolutely. And I have a whole bunch of books on my bookcase that, there's some that were like really quick and, within 6 or 9 months, there was the book. But I also have a whole bunch that took, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, or even more. But now they're published, and many of them have won awards and have opened all kinds of doors for the authors. So it is a matter of like definitely have your goals, but then also be flexible and be persistent, and it will happen. I have some people in the class now who've gotten sick or whatever, and I said, well, you still wrote this week, so you're moving forward. It might not be as fast as you wanted, but you're moving forward. And, again, like it comes back to focusing on supporting what you are doing and not just beating yourself up, because your muse likes that, look what I did, right? Your muse likes the positive energy and passion and excitement and that patting yourself on the back. And so it's really important to feed that. In my Writing in the Zone, my 5 steps, the last step is gratitude. Because even if you just sat there and thought about the book and didn't write and you had wanted to write, if you feel gratitude for, like, I took the time, I sat there, I immersed myself in the book's energy, even if I didn't get anything done that looks productive, you're setting yourself up for the next time. Your creative spirit responds to that. But your creative spirit also responds to, oh, I'm a loser, I didn't write, blah, blah, blah. Like, it responds to that too, and not positively. So it's really important what message we're giving ourselves, and we got to be kind.
Yes, so important. What we focus on is what grows more fully in our lives. And another quote that comes to mind from Dan Kennedy is, focus on the gaps, not the gains. Sorry,
Dan Sullivan.
opposite. Cancel. Dan Sullivan. Thanks for my backup memory. Focus on the gains, not the gaps. Focus on the gains, not the gaps.
By Dan Sullivan.
By Dan Sullivan. Thank you, Ivani. Yes. Yeah. So absolutely, that's exactly what you're addressing. Because there are always going to be the gaps. And there are always going to be the gains, like you said. And we have people in our community similarly who signed up for a 30-day writing challenge that we hosted, and they ended up getting sick during it, much like your client. And it's like, but they still wrote. They still wrote during part of the time and ended up accomplishing more than they would have otherwise. So one of the things that came to mind when you were talking earlier, I meant to mention is, so you do speaking nationally and internationally, and I would imagine that some of your audiences are medical professionals.
Yeah, it really varies. One of the most fun was Thailand, and I got a call from, originally it was an email. It was from what was it called? NLP Top Coach. And they're in Bangkok, and one of the people had been in my book writing class, the owner of the company, the president of the company, and so they brought me out to teach their community of coaches, and we had people from Malaysia and Hong Kong, Bangkok, Vietnam. There were a couple of other countries too. I was so blown away. And they, and it was this international community, and it was so interesting to kind of be a part of an international community where like people have all these different languages, but they all speak English, and that's how they connect. And it was really amazing. And then there was a person in that class who was he teaches at the foremost business school in Bangkok, NIDA business school, and so he had me come in and do the first thing was a several day program, but he had me do a half-day workshop with professors there, and it was really fun. So it's really a variety of different kinds of people that I'll teach or present to.
Yeah, fantastic. Thanks for clarifying that. And part of the reason for mentioning the medical thing initially was what came to mind as a speaker, because this might apply to many in your audience even more than ours. There are, as there are professionals from all backgrounds as baby boomers looking at retiring from their first career, and yet they're still plenty young to look forward to what they might next like to do. And I would think for you in particular, if you're speaking to audiences of all kinds, including there's often more budget for paid speaking positions, in the medical communities. And I would imagine that there would be many in that community as well as other professional communities who really need to hear your message and your advice. So I would just and you said, you have spoken to some of those, such as in Thailand. Have you spoken to other audiences from a variety of professions that are also paid speaking gigs? And again, the reason I mention that is, sorry, not to pry, but to rather let people know what kind of options and opportunities are available to take, their own skills and platform building into the paid speaking genre.
Yeah, that's a great question. Definitely the medical community and several conferences around that. Writers, like the San Francisco Writers Conference. So that's a group, but a group that probably does have less money. You're right. And actually that was not a paid speaking gig, but clients came out of it. So, that's another thing to think about. Sometimes it's worth doing a gig where you're not necessarily paid, but you end up with new clients, and that can be worthwhile. Coaches is definitely a group that I've spoken with, sometimes paid, sometimes unpaid. But and as I see my clients, lots of variety. One of my clients was just in Paris at an international conference on trauma, and he just got a book deal as well, Dr. James Zender. So, it's sometimes I think conferences that are focused on particular both health and mental health issues can be a great possibility if you have those kind of credentials. Parenting, but it varies, and sometimes too, if it's hard to get paid speaking gigs sometimes for what you're doing, what a listener is doing, they might just think about doing webinars or something like that. Find your own people and start to do webinars, and you can do a free one to get people interested and give them some information, but then they can sign up for a 4-week program or 8-week program or a teleseminar, similar thing. So those are maybe some ways to make sure there's income associated with those kind of activities.
Yeah, definitely. And I know you have plenty of going on, so you probably don't need more ideas but like you, we love ideating. And one of our former podcast guests is Eric Wall, and he is an artist who's taken his visual artist who's taken his painting into corporations and huge audiences, even stadium size sometimes, with a large on-stage demonstration of painting something, bringing something to life in the process as a part of his speech, his presentation of the importance of bringing creativity into the corporate arena. So as you were talking, it's like it brought to mind that concept of, again, one of the gifts that you would have as well, and that is, to bring creativity into, like the clients you said who are used to academic writing and knew how to write, but by infusing the concept of how to tell a story creatively and bringing creativity into the writing, it just kind of brings it to life.
Especially as brands get more involved with being a creative company or forward-thinking company, and then you have all these creators who would love, and you can often get brands, if you can offer, and I think Emily and Peterson spoke about this, who we had on our podcast as well, is just learning how to position whatever creativity that you have in a way that a brand or a company would want it as well. So kind of learning to balance the two worlds and communicate it all.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
So speaking of jobs and paid presentations and speeches and that sort of thing, so a lot in our audience of creators are looking for opportunities to earn income through their creative endeavors, and I know that there's something about ghostwriting. You've mentioned something about ghostwriting. You have a service. I was digging around your site this morning, and you have a service where and I think you talked about it a little bit earlier, where you will connect people with ghostwriters if you're not a fit to work with them. And so we're just wondering about what that process is like, both on the author side, like an author looking for a ghostwriter, but then also on the ghostwriting side, like how, if somebody wants to earn money while writing, even if it's not necessarily immediately through their book, how can they get involved with freelance writing, ghostwriting, that type of stuff?
Great question. So let's start with somebody who wants to be a ghostwriter. So the hardest thing really is getting experience. And so in the beginning, it's often a good idea to just get some experience, and you might undercharge just to get that experience. So I actually did some pro bono work with someone she was a CNN anchor, and I was really I really believed in her message. So, and then she had gone up against Monsanto, so they had sued her, and she had basically, they broke the bank, right? So she wasn't in a position to pay for my services, and I felt like, this is somebody who I really want to support what she did. She was a whistleblower, and at the same time, I could get some experience under my belt and have a nice. I ended up with a nice testimonial from somebody who, normally wouldn't hire me because I was at the very beginning of my career. So I would say, one thing is just to be open to taking on 1 or 2 projects at, a lower rate just to get that experience. And, the other is, if you are ghostwriting, I would say, hire an editor. Even though you might be spending the money you're being paid for that editor, it's like getting a graduate degree. You will, if you hire a good editor. And so, that first project or 2 might even just break even, but it's a great way to really get good at what you're doing much more quickly. So that those might be some suggestions. I do have a referral service. Most of my editors and ghostwriters are fairly high end. But occasionally I run into people who don't have much of a budget, and I don't like to turn people away. So, if somebody certainly shows that they have good skills and they just don't have a ton of work to show for it, but they have some, sometimes I will keep them in the back of mind for referrals when somebody doesn't have the funds. And actually, I just made a match on that today. So yeah, that's a possibility. As to the experience of being an author and hiring a ghostwriter, you want to make sure that the person has worked in your genre or is really great, maybe also is really great with capturing voice. So sometimes it's a good idea to work with them on one chapter first, or even on an article, to just see what it's like to work with them. But at the same time, I would say if their first draft isn't your voice, hopefully not the whole book, right? You're just, you start out with one piece and give them some feedback. But if they send you some pages and it's not your voice, work with them. Tell them, well, that doesn't quite sound like me because I wouldn't say this, or, give them some tips. Some people, some writers are so good at that. They've been doing this for a long time, and they're really fine-tuned to how to create that voice that they hear in you when they interview you. Mm-hmm. But it's something you can work with your writer. So voice is a really big thing when you're choosing a ghostwriter. But definitely look at, what's their other work. If the voice is totally different from what you want, don't worry about that, because often they have a very broad range. But try to see if they, have a bunch of examples, so you can get a sense for how broad that range is. And, there are writers of all different, you can find ghostwriters for $5,000 or $10,000 for a book, and you can find ghostwriters for well over 100 or even 200,000. So it really varies. I would say most of the writers I work with charge 40 to 60, sometimes more than that. But I also have some that charge more, around 25,000. And then it depends on the length of the book as well. And is there research needed? That ups the price a bit too. So it does vary a lot. And also a writer's process varies. So for a lot of writers, they're going to interview you, collect a lot of information, read whatever, research or notes or data you have, or if you have like some coursework that, they'll look at your courses, or they'll look at your webinars to get a feel for all the material before they start writing. And then, a lot of them are very big on structure. So they'll first develop the structure with you, and then they'll start to write. So it is expensive. So generally, for a good writer, so you want to make sure you have the budget for the whole thing. You certainly don't want to go in and say, well, I can afford the first third, and I'll just, envision that the rest is going to come. If you're going to invest that in the project, make sure you have the whole amount.
Yeah, and that's great advice, and also what that entails, what it covers, like have a contract.
Yeah.
Because if you're, for instance, if it's a medical professional or other profession, so often the people, that client, that prospective ghostwriting client could be earning so much more if they were doing their own profession, and then taking that earnings to pay the ghostwriter, because it does take, that ghostwriter is investing potentially 6 months or a year of their time to go deep, and which means it's saving the recipient that in their life.
Yeah, and also a really good writer, is going to write at such a level that probably the author can't. Some of the writers I work with have been in the publishing industry for decades. Some are journalists, and so boy, they know how to make a story sound amazing, and they know, just how to find those details that are going to make it come to life and add suspense and interest and excitement, and tell the story in a way that a doctor isn't necessarily going to know how to do. And the other thing that one of my writers said recently, which I thought was so good, was he said to his client who got a book deal with Hachette, which is a major publisher, but he said, look, you're a surgeon, and I wouldn't tell you what to do in the surgery room. Yeah. And I'm the writer, and so you do have to trust me. And, the writers I work with vary. Some are very flexible, but some are really, look, I'm the professional and I know what's going to work, and you've got to trust it. So you should also, if you're an author looking to hire a writer, make sure that it's a fit. Maybe that is the person you want, who is like, you got to trust me, I know what I'm doing, and they're going to be very firm, and you'll probably get, a really great book, versus no, I really want to call the shots here, and I want somebody who's going to say yes to what I want, even if it's not as marketable. So, it's important to know ahead of time. Like, that's a good question to ask the writer, is how firm are you about, what this book ends up being? Now, that writer, his name always appears on the book as a with at the bottom of the cover, smaller than the author, but still, his name is as a with. So, so he's very invested in how the book turns out because his name's on it, versus if you hire a ghostwriter whose name's not on it, they may be very flexible about what goes in the book, because they may not even be able to share with people that they wrote the book if you have a non-disclosure agreement and don't want them to share that fact. So there are lots of different ways in which kind of the writing occurs, and you have to think about what's best for you. I actually, on my website, have a free ebook called 20 Questions to Ask a Ghostwriter Before You Hire Yours, and I have a similar one for editors, for hiring an editor. And so yeah, there are lots of fun free stuff if you're looking for guidance in those areas.
Do you have a couple platforms that people who want to be ghostwriters could go and list themselves, or what are the best practices around that?
Yeah, I don't. I mean, they would need to contact me and give me some examples, some samples of work that they've ghostwritten, and we'd go from there. They would let me know what they charge and that kind of thing. So yeah, they could just Lisa at lisatenner.com, and they should probably look at my website first, lisatenner.com, just to get a sense of the kinds of authors I tend to represent. Although, with ghostwriting, usually it's nonfiction, but occasionally I have somebody asking for fiction or a children's book. So I'm open to ghostwriters in different genres.
Okay,
awesome.
Great. So back to bringing this toward the last two questions that we have for you before we let you go. And you mentioned you're writing in the zone and teaching that course. So what's your daily creative routine? Do you have one that serves you? And if not, or what you recommend for your writers?
Yeah. So I'm a little embarrassed to say I do not have a daily creative routine, but my daily routine is that I always do my Qigong. And I would say, it's a internal practice. So the focus is on cultivating internal energy, and that really feeds my creativity. So that I do every day. I also, maybe 3 or 4 years ago, I hired a writing coach. We were actually both teaching workshops to the International Coaches Federation and the New England branch of that. And I wanted somebody that I could teach my Meet Your Muse exercise so they could lead me in that exercise, but somebody who I felt was resonant and intuitive. And so I hired my own writing coach, and I actually have a call with her today. So that has also helped me kind of keep my practice, maybe not front and center, but keep an eye on that. And then one thing I'm also, and as I said, I love to schedule time with friends. I don't do it when I'm teaching a course necessarily, because that requires so much of me. But as soon as the course is over, I'm going to be doing more of that writing with a friend. And I actually, this time I'm hiring somebody, because I mentioned to you I have this eye strain. So I'm hiring somebody to take all my notes for these different books and type them all in. And then I'm going to just cut and paste and move things around and figure out, okay, these are the books now, and really do something with them, because they've been sitting there a while. So yeah, those are some. But so the practice that's not daily, but it is a practice, is having my writing coach do my Meet Your Muse exercise with me. And actually, people can find that exercise free on my website. There's an audio. It's not like fancy record, the way it's recorded. I recorded it on a phone, but it gets to the heart of the exercise. And you just go to lisatenner.com/meet-your-muse. And so that is one of my practices, is connecting with my muse. And but I do find when I write in the morning, that's very powerful. It's just, it's easy. I'm in that in-between state, and a lot often flows.
That's all wonderful. Yeah, we'll definitely link to that Muse audio link from the podcast, as well as from the I Create Daily website, icreatedaily.com, because we have a couple articles that mention muses and muse resources. So we'll link that there as well. And of course, send people to your site, lisatenner.com. Do you have any concluding things you'd like to share? Like, for instance, your course you're in the process of right now that people can only sign up for once a year, but do you have like a waiting list? Same thing for your fall course. And I think you start your medical teaching again in June. So you've got a full roster of teaching. So you want to just recap that for folks?
Sure, thank you. If somebody's interested in Bring Your Book to Life, they could definitely start exploring now, because there's also pre-work we could be doing, even starting, over the next month. And actually, they could start right away, because they could work on the quick start, which is the very first part of the course. So they don't have to wait till January of next year. You could start in now, and also there is that book proposal course that will be starting in September. So that's something to think about. But if somebody were just interested in coaching, that's something. Like I said, I'm going to focus on my books for a little bit, but I'm starting a little bit of a waiting list. So if somebody wanted to start in June or July, they could contact me now for coaching. And then I'm always doing the referral work. So that's something I'm happy to do. And Harvard Medical School CME publishing courses in June. I don't have the exact dates offhand, but if somebody's thinking of a health book or a self-help book or anything like that, there are agents there, they're publishers, more agents than publishers, I would say, but there are a few publishers. And it's a great immersion in what it takes to successfully publish a book. It also includes blog writing, social media, lots of great stuff for authors. So that, be fun to see you there. Definitely introduce yourself if you come to that. And you can look online, Harvard Medical School CME publishing course, if you wanted to find it.
And the CME is Continued Medical Education?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Awesome.
CME. And so to conclude with this question, what is your vision for your work? I know you want to pull your writings and things together and, get it into some kind of book form, but what's your longer term horizon for your own creative work?
So, it really does focus on getting some books done myself now. It's been a while since I published my own book, so that's a big piece that I want to do. And I've also thought, and I've talked with a colleague about with the book proposal course, maybe to create something that also a self-help, self-study kind of version of the book proposal course. So we've talked about that. So I do have some products in mind, but I'm still kind of playing with how much I want to do that. So right now I'm in kind of a place of figuring out what is the long-term strategic plan. And I actually couldn't tell you exactly, because I'm sort of playing with different ideas. But I love what I do, so I don't feel like this huge, oh my gosh, got to find another program or project, or I'm really enjoying it. So there's not a huge push for, okay, let's do the next step. The next step really feels like, let's get some books completed now.
Fantastic. Yeah, and it makes so much sense. When you're enjoying what you're doing, then you are already in the journey. And you can see the horizon and not yet have that next ship visible. So right now it's just the horizon and you're enjoying the journey, except for maybe the one with some books on the horizon.
Well, it's like us too. It's like we love every day of what we do, and then we have a new idea and we're like, oh, that's exciting too. The creative energy.
Yeah, we want to do it all, but we obviously can't. And so,
and that's, I think, a big piece that I figured out is that, I constantly have ideas, but I'm a little more a little more careful about just jumping in and starting them, because I realized that each idea takes time, and they may not be what I really, really want to do, and I love what I'm doing. So, be careful of just jumping on every idea I have. But I will say, like, one thing that I'm kind of playing with, and my husband has talked about a lot, is, my work is something I could do from anywhere. Yeah. So I think this is a while off, but once our youngest maybe is out of the house, maybe we would do some traveling and work from, somewhere warm in the winter. Or so I guess that's a thing that we kind of play with in our minds.
Absolutely. So toward that, I mean, we have a similar thing actually, and we've been in the same house for 30 years. Well, even long before Devani was born. And so there's what we realize is we keep talking about this, but one of the ways to make it happen sooner, it's like your pre-work course. It's like, okay, the pre-work is we need to begin to clear out and simplify and reduce all the stuff that requires us to be here in the first place, and all the stuff that demands our attention. So there's work you can do in that direction. And, just the fact of beginning that process, like you're beginning the process of having someone pull all the text and things that you have together into some semblance of form, is that begins, it sets it in motion, right?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And it's the same with a book, right? Just start.
Yes, definitely.
Just
start. Great advice.
That is a great note to end on. Just start.
Just start. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Lisa Tenner, book and writing and publishing coach.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks. Okay.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks so much for joining us for the I Create Daily podcast. Please let us know what creatives you would like us to interview and what topics you would be interested in hearing more about.
And if you enjoyed this show, please leave a review on iTunes. We value your feedback. We read all the reviews, and it just helps us get the word out on the I Create Daily podcast. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much.